So we left off, and like I said, I'm going to try and get us through the rest of the Hobbit quickly so we can start till we have faces. We left off on Friday with Bilbo admitting to having given the Arkenstone to Bard, and Thorin says, I wish Gandalf were here, curse him for his choice for you, and Gandalf throws off his cloak and says, I'm here, Here is Gandalf, none too soon it seems, page 251. If you don't like my burglar, please don't damage him, put him down, listen first to what he has to say. And Bilbo says, bottom of 251, dear me, I'm sure this is all very uncomfortable, understatement of the year. You may remember saying that I might choose my own 14th share. That is, you said that when? Months ago, back in my little hobbit hole. Perhaps I took it too literally. I've been told that dwarves are sometimes politer in word than in deed. Maybe you didn't really mean it, Bilbo is suggesting. Where did he get this idea? Smaug, okay? The time was, all the same, when you seemed to think that I had been of some service. Descendant of rats, indeed. Is this all the service of you and your family that I was promised, Thorin? Take it that I have disposed of my share as I wished, and let it go at that. That is, my 14th share, I took the Arkenstone. I gave it to Bard. Payment received in full. You don't have to give me anything else. Okay? Because what has Bard offered Thorin? The Arkenstone back. But it's in return for what? 1/14, okay? So he gets the Arkenstone back. Bard gets essentially, men of Lake Town and such, elves. Bard gets Bilbo's share. What does Thorin lose in this negotiation? Pride? Does he lose anything financially? Well, no. He ends up with exactly what he would have ended up with the original bargain back at Bilbo's home. Okay? Thorin, I will take it at that. And I will let you go at that, and may we never meet again. And then he turns and, notice, speaks to Bard and the elves and the others who are listening. I am betrayed. It was rightly guessed that I could not forbear to redeem the Arkenstone, the treasure of my house. For it I will give 1/14 share of the hoard in silver and gold, setting aside the gems. That is, you only get silver and gold, you don't get any diamonds, sapphires, rubies, etc., or sapphires or rubies. But that shall be accounted the promised share of this trade, and with that reward he shall depart. You can divide it as you will. He will get little enough, I doubt not. In other words, Thorin is saying, you get his 14th share, and I'm pretty sure he's going to walk away from here with nothing. He's saying something about the generosity of the elves and men. You're not going to give Bilbo anything. Take him if you wish him to live. No friendship of mine goes with him. So, Bilbo leaves. And Bard says, we're not giving up the stone until we get the treasure. Okay? Gandalf, you're not making a very splendid figure as king under the mountain. But things may change yet. Why do you think Gandalf says, but things may change yet?
He knows that the goblins are...
Yeah, he's aware of what's getting ready to happen. Thorin, they may indeed. And already, so strong was the bewilderment of the treasure upon him, he was pondering whether, by the help of Dain, he might not recapture the Arkenstone and withhold the share of the reward. What has the narrator just told us obliquely? That is, he hasn't come out and directly stated it. What's Thorin thinking? No, not kill everybody. Well, that might come as a result. He's not going to honor his word. He's not going to be true to his word. He's thinking, how can I get out of this? Okay? Why? Because we are told. So strong was the bewilderment bewilderment of the treasure. Earlier on, and I can't remember where because I got so many places marked, I don't remember which one it is. We are told the treasure has what on it? Spells. Okay. What happens, moreover, not only does it have some kind of spells on it, Smaug's been living on it for years. It's got Smaug's effect on it. Okay? So, you couple those two together with the natural dwarvish desire for gold and jewels and stuff, and it's almost like Thorin can't help himself. This is like, putting a junkie in a room full of, paraphernalia. and essentially having the junkie say, okay, I'm going to give all this up. It's probably not going to happen. So, Thorin sends them off. They go off. And notice, both sides are preparing for battle. It's not where Thorin sends an emissary down with 1/14 the share, because one person can't carry that. Okay. Page 254. The Elven King says, I'm going to stick around, but he says, long will I tarry ere I begin this war for gold. I will wait before I do what? Fire the first shot. Why? The dwarves cannot pass us unless we will, that is, unless we desire them to, or do anything that we cannot mark. They can't get around us. They can't do anything. What's he saying? What position are the dwarves in?
They're not going to be able to eat forever.
Yeah, they're under siege. They're stuck in the mountain. They can't escape. The Elven King is saying, we have what on our side? Time. I mean, what did the riddle time say? What's it do? It devours everything. So all he's saying is, all we have to do is what? Wait them out. They can't eat the gold. They can't drink the silver. He says, let us hope still for something that will bring reconciliation. Our advantage in numbers will be enough, if in the end it must come to unhappy blows. If we have to actually go to blows, he says, we've got numbers on our side. But let's hope it doesn't. Let's hope something else happens. Okay? And we're told clouds are rolling in. It's getting darker and darker and darker. Looks like a vast cloud of birds, middle of 255. And Gandalf says, halt, who appears suddenly, stood alone, arms uplifted, between the advancing dwarves and the ranks awaiting them. That is, the advancing dwarves, these are Danes, folks. He says, halt, dread has come upon you all. It's come more swiftly than I guessed. The goblins, okay? And he mentions Bolg of the north is coming, Dane, whose father you slew in Moria. Behold, the bats are above his army. Okay. Notice he speaks to Dane, and he says, Bolg is coming, whose father you slew. So why is that significant? What is Bolg there for? Revenge. You killed his father, now he's coming back for you. Okay? Moreover, the bats have come and they're clouding the sky. Okay? So, Gandalf says, there is time yet for counsel. That is, let's meet and do what?
Put a team together.
Put a team together. Okay, what kind of team? Let's join forces and battle what? A common enemy. Goblins. So began a battle, top of 256, that none had expected. And it was called the Battle of Five Armies, and it was very terrible. Upon one side were the goblins and the wild wolves, and upon the other were elves and men and dwarves. Why? Because elves and men and dwarves hate what more than they do each other? Goblins. Okay? This is, this is essentially a world war within the context, at least, of this major area of Middle Earth. Okay? So they come together, Gandalf, the elves, dwarves, men, they talk and come up with a plan. And we're told what the plan is in 256. This is the plan that he made in council with the Elven King and with Bard and with Dame. For the Dwarf Lord now joined them. The goblins were the foes of all, and at their coming, all other foes were forgotten. Excuse me, all other quarrels were forgotten. All right? So, we get the battle, and the battle lasts roughly about 4 pages. And I've not seen it, but I'm pretty sure Peter Jackson puts an entire film into the battle. Okay? And we get to the end of that chapter, 260, and the clouds start to separate because of the wind. There's a red sunset. And Bilbo says, or seeing the sudden gleam, we're told, in the middle of page 260, seeing the sudden gleam in the gloom, Bilbo looked around. Gleam. Gleam means a brief shining moment of light. Gloom means darkness. So the bright light shining in the darkness, Bilbo gives a great cry. Why? He sees something. What does he see? Well, in that instant of light, he sees the eagles. Now, how big are the eagles? These aren't our eagles, are they? No, because these eagles are big enough to carry a man. I mean, they carry Gandalf. They're big enough to carry a couple of dwarves at a time. Now, dwarves, about that tall, 100 pounds or so, but they're also armed to the teeth, and the eagles can still carry them. All right? So Bilbo passes out. He wakes up, page 261. It says, at any rate, I'm not yet one of the fallen heroes. Still time for that. In other words, knock on wood, I'm not dead yet. Okay. He speaks, somebody hears his name, he pulls off his ring, and we're told by the man, I've come looking for you. Gandalf says, this is where you were last time you were seen. So the man takes Bilbo to Thorin, bottom of 262. And there indeed lay Thorin Oakenshield. Wounded with many wounds, his rent armor and notched axe were cast upon the floor. And he looks up as Bilbo comes beside him. And he says to Bilbo, farewell, good thief. Well, that's an oxymoron, right? How can you be a good thief? Good is a moral term. Okay? Now, it might mean here, you are especially adept at thievery. I don't think that's what he means, though. I think he means now. He didn't mean this several pages ago or several days ago. He means now. Bilbo, that's a damn smart thing you did, stealing the Arkenstone. Good job. Farewell, good thief. I go now to the halls of waiting to sit beside my fathers until the world is renewed. The implication is, once the world is renewed, what's going to happen? He comes back. Okay? Whether it's resurrection or reincarnation, here it's not clear. Within Tolkien's cosmology, as he kind of works it out, elves can be reincarnated. They go off to the halls of Mandos for a while, they get their batteries recharged, they're like immortal Priuses. And then, they come back. Not Priuses, it's the Chevy Volt, that's what I was thinking. So, he then goes on, since I leave now all gold and silver and go where it is of little worth. Okay? I'm leaving behind all treasure. Where I'm going, treasure can't help me. I wish to part in friendship from you, and I would take back my words and deeds at the gate. Again, that word, would, past tense, present tense, will. Here, it doesn't only mean ability to do something. Like, I will go to the store. Okay? It means desire or wished, past tense. I what? Desire to take back my words. I want to take back my words. Bilbo, this is a bitter adventure if it must end so, and not a mountain of gold can amend it. Yet I'm glad that I've shared in your perils. That has been more than any Baggins deserves. Okay? What did he say about adventures at the beginning of the book? They make you late for dinner. They do a little bit more than that. He thought he was doing what? Just going off on a frolic. Okay? Thorin, no. And notice, exclamation mark. Thorin is saying, no, you're wrong. Why? There is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. And Tolkien has West with a capital W. That doesn't simply mean west of where we now are, though that is true. He means what's called within Tolkien's cosmology again, the true West. The West that is west over the sundering seas where the gods dwell. Where the elves left Middle-earth, went off, dwelt with the gods, and then they come back to Middle-earth. Okay? He calls him a child of that. That's essentially like saying in our world, a child of heaven. A child of paradise. In other words, you don't belong here. But then he goes on. Some courage and some wisdom blended in measure. Blended, mixed together. Well, where did Bilbo show courage? Spiders, elves, Smaug. Okay. He went down twice to Smaug's lair when Smaug was there. Stealing the Arkenstone, leaving the camp, going to the men, trading the Arkenstone, and then what? Going back. You would think, he stole the Arkenstone. That's what Thorin wants more than anything else. Then he would stay. Why? Because that's safe. Stay with the men. But he doesn't. He goes back. Why? Why did you go back to the dwarves after giving Bard the Arkenstone? He's concerned about one thing. He doesn't want Bomber to get in trouble. Okay? Because he took Bomber's place in the Night Watch. So, courage and wisdom. In the 1960s, an Old English scholar wrote about the Old English epic poem Beowulf, that it's ultimately has as a controlling theme these two things. Sapientiae et fortitudo. Sapientiae is wisdom, et is and, fortitudo is strength and or courage. Now, Caskey wrote this article long after Tolkien had written The Hobbit. Okay? But Tolkien knew Beowulf as well as anybody. And Tolkien knew, and he talks in his essay on Beowulf about these two qualities of the character of Beowulf. Okay? And he has Thorin ascribe these qualities to his Beowulf of sorts of the Hobbit. Only he's not a big, strapping, man with the strength of 30 men in each hand grip. He's a hobbit. Okay? Some courage and some wisdom blended in measure. If more of us valued, notice, food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. Food, cheer, song versus gold, hoarded gold. What are these? Where do we see or experience these? in life. Maybe not as much today, but, imagine in the Middle Ages. Church, possibly. Where else? Taverns? What happens in taverns? Do you simply go to a bar to get drunk? Okay, that's why I said simply. Do you go to a bar always, only by yourself? No. Who do you go with? Why?
Socialize.
Socialize. To have fun. This is all part of, to use a big word, conviviality. Getting together, is another way of putting it. Fellowship is kind of an old-fashioned way of talking about it, where you just want to go off and hang out with some friends and have some good food. Cheer can be the attitude that you have while there. It could also be what happens to you as you drink a little bit. You get a little more cheery and maybe some song, okay? Because within the context here, within the context of Old English literature, those two go along with this. Okay? We know from written sources that in Anglo-Saxon times, people are sitting in an Anglo-Saxon hall, food would be served, drink would be served, and then somebody would break out the medieval version of the guitar, the harp. And they would start singing a song. The song might be Beowulf. It might be another Old English poem or something. But the three always go together. And notice he says, if there were more of these, then what? If more of us valued these above this. Okay. Notice it's not just gold. It's hoarded gold. What's the difference between hoarded gold and gold? What do you do when you hoard something? You don't give it up. You keep it to yourself. You don't do what with it? You don't use it. You don't spend it. Okay? Now, we could replace this and say banked money. What good does it do to have $1 billion if you don't use it? That's what Tolkien's getting at. He's saying there is far too much in the world, whether the world of the Hobbit or our world of what? Too much of this and too little of this. Because this implies others. This implies me. You don't go and share food, cheer, and song by yourself. Okay? And if you spend money, what happens to it? Pure and simple. I don't care how you spend it. Whether you spend it on this, or you spend it on cars, or you spend it on computers, or phones, or planes, or whatever. That money enters the economy, right? And then you can start extrapolating from that. If you spend more and more and more and more of it, what happens? Well, whoever's providing the things that you're spending it on, eventually is going to have to do what? No. Expand. If everybody in this room had $10 billion, and you all went out and you all wanted to buy, I don't know, a Gulfstream, plane, jet, what would the makers of Gulfstream probably end up having to do? Make more jets. How do they do that? Hire more people. Hire more people, they get paid. What can they then do? Okay? It's part of this cycle. But you hoard it That doesn't do any good. What good did the gold under the mountain do for Smaug? None. What about for the men of Lake Town? None. What about for Dane's dwarves? None. The elves? None. But once it's broken up, once it's shared, then everybody starts getting, a proverbial piece of the pie. So, he says it would what? It would be a merrier world. Why? Because there'd be cheer and song. Okay. Bilbo turns away. And he went by himself and sat alone, wrapped in a blanket. And whether you believe it or not, he wept until his eyes were red and his voice was hoarse. He was a kindly little soul. And he says, "A mercy it is that I woke up when I did. I wish Thorin were living, but I'm glad that we parted in kindness. You are a fool, Bilbo Baggins, and you made a great mess of that business with the stone." He doesn't understand what he did with the Arkenstone. He doesn't understand that essentially became what for Thorin? Just the opposite, actually. Initially, it became his bane, his end. What does it finally do? It breaks the spell of the gold. And there is a battle in spite of all your efforts to buy peace and quiet. Yeah, but who was the battle between? See, Bilbo thought he was buying peace and quiet between men, elves, and dwarves. Did he? No. He didn't buy peace and quiet for that. Okay? There was a battle. Why? Because the men, elves, and dwarves were attacked by others. If you want to go all modern, outsiders. So they're all xenophobic and that kind of BS. No. He used that stone properly. It broke the spell around Thorin so that he united with others. And notice what he determines before he dies. This is no good. This is what he was going to do otherwise. It's Bilbo who opens his eyes. Okay? We're told, that's when we're then told that Beorn shows up, rescued Thorin and such. And 265, Thorin is buried deep beneath the mountain with the Arkenstone on his chest and such. Okay. 14th share is given to Bard. And Dane says, 265, "We will honor the agreement of the dead, and he has now the Arkenstone in his keeping." Okay. That is, Thorin got his Arkenstone. Right? But Dane says, we're still going to honor the agreement. Because Dane could say, "I didn't make that agreement." No, you made that with him. He's dead. New agreement time. But he doesn't. He honors it. To Bilbo he says, 265, "This treasure is as much yours as it is mine. The old agreements cannot stand since so many have a claim in its winning and defense. And even though you were willing to lay aside all your claim, I should wish that the words of Thorin of which he repented should not prove true, that we should give you little. I would reward you most richly of all." And Bilbo says, "Ah, shucks, that's okay." And he rides away with, we're told, 2 small chests, one filled with silver, one with gold. And Bilbo says, "That will be quite as much as I can manage." Now, by manage, does he mean that's more than enough for me, that's all I can carry? Or does he mean manage, use wisely? I think that's what he means. And if we were to be reading The Lord of the Rings, we would jump from here to The Lord of the Rings 60 years later, and we would find out what? Bilbo is, quote unquote, still managing that treasure. He hasn't spent all of it. All right? So they say goodbye to Gandalf and such. Bilbo and Gandalf go off with Beorn. They spend the Yuletide season with Beorn. Men come from far and wide. He throws a great party, etc. We find out about the necromancer, and that's where we hear page 270, that Gandalf and the Council of the White Wizards, masters of lore and good magic, they had at last driven the necromancer from his dark hold. And Gandalf says, you know, the North will be freed from that horror for many long years, I hope. Yet I wish you were banished from the world. Elrond, it would be well indeed, but I fear that will not come about in this age of the world or for many after. Why does Elrond say that? Because Tolkien, at this point, has no idea of the Lord of the Rings. He's not aware in his mind that the War of the Ring, okay, Tolkien's original title for the Lord of the Rings, will occur in less than 100 years. Okay? That is not a quote-unquote age of the world. An age of the world in Tolkien's Middle-earth is thousands of years. Right? So, they make their way home. Let's see here. And what does Bilbo discover when he gets home?
Everybody's buying stuff.
Yeah, he gets home, and there's essentially an auction sign out front. And people are trying to buy everything. Why? They think he's dead. How long has he been gone? Yeah, just under a year, actually. Okay? I mean, in the United States, you got to be gone missing for 7 years before somebody can have you declared legally dead. Okay? Not here, apparently. So Bilbo gets home, and he says, page 276, last page. Then the prophecies, Balin comes after a while, after Bilbo settles in. Balin comes and visits, okay, with Gandalf, tells Bilbo that, Lake Town's been rebuilt, Bard's a good leader, etc. The old master, took some of the treasure and fled. And Bilbo says, then the prophecies of the old songs have turned out to be true after a fashion. Okay, what prophecies, what old songs? Balin, just before then. The new master is of a wiser kind, and very popular, for of course he gets most of the credit for the present prosperity. Well, who's the new master? Bard. Okay? They are making songs which say that in his day the rivers run with gold. That's one of those old prophecies. Okay? Bilbo, okay. So the old prophecies, the prophecies of the old songs have turned out to be true after a fashion. Gandalf, of course. Why should they not prove true? That is, why would you disbelieve these old prophecies? Surely you don't disbelieve the prophecies because you had a hand in bringing them about yourself. That is, Bilbo, are you telling me you don't think the prophecies are true merely because you participated? It's a question. It's not an assertion. You don't really suppose, do you, that all your adventures and escapes were managed by mere luck, just for your sole benefit? Okay. You're a very fine person, Mr. Baggins, and I'm very fond of you, but you are only quite a little fellow in a wide world. What's Gandalf suggesting? There are greater forces at work. Right? Greater forces at work. Yes, Bilbo had a hand in fulfilling the prophecies, but something else was at work too. And that's an idea Tolkien then pulls into the second chapter of the first volume of The Lord of the Rings. Frodo wonders why he has the ring, Bilbo's ring. Right? And Gandalf says it's not chance. There was some power behind Bilbo's finding the ring, and the power wasn't Sauron. And Bilbo's like, what? You mean it was just, I was intended? And he says, that's exactly it. You were intended to have this. Tolkien never specifies within the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit what that power is. He never says, God is in control, Bilbo, and everything works according to his will. Doesn't do that. The closest he gets to this is he says, fortune. Some call it fortune. Okay? Now, take the Hobbit, put it away, because now we start a different kind of tale. This is a tale of Tolkien's purely out of his imagination. Yeah, it's got elements from other folk tales and things like that. But now we start C.S. Lewis. Lewis and Tolkien, for much of their adult lives, from about the time they both turned approximately 30 or so to their 50s or early 60s, were close friends. Okay? Both professors of literature at Oxford. Tolkien essentially was a doctor. Lewis wasn't. Lewis was a Don. Tolkien was professor of Anglo-Saxon. Lewis was professor of medieval literature. Okay? They were both in that group that I mentioned before, the Inklings. Okay? They both loved mythology and the older kinds of stories. Lewis also, probably a little bit more than Tolkien, Lewis really loved classical myth, ancient Greco-Roman myth. Tolkien probably loved more than Greco-Roman myth, Northern myth, Scandinavian, Germanic myth. But Tolkien also loved Celtic myth, Welsh mythology, Finnish mythology, and such. Okay? Till We Have Faces, I don't know which one you have, but mine has underneath the head title, A Myth Retold. And hopefully the one you have includes at the back the story of Cupid and Psyche. Okay? That is the myth retold. What is the myth of Cupid and Psyche? Anybody know? Anybody read it before or heard it before? Morgan?
I don't remember all of it. I just remember reading it in high school.
Okay. So Psyche is a girl with a couple of sisters. And Cupid kind of falls in love with her. Okay? But she never sees his face. So she goes off and marries Cupid, doesn't see his face, and the two sisters are jealous of her. I mean, extremely jealous. And they make her think that this is a monster that she's actually sleeping with every night. Okay? So they convince her to bring a candle into the bedroom and one night while Cupid is asleep to hold it to look at him. Well, she does. And when she holds the candle over him, wax drips on him and wakes him up. And he's furious. Why? Because it shows his lack of trust in her, lack of trust in him. Okay? That's the basic myth. This is Lewis's retelling of it. Okay? This is the last work of fiction C.S. Lewis wrote. Well, yeah. It's the last work of fiction he wrote. He writes another thing that's kind of fiction called A Grief Observed. He writes it under the pseudonym, I think it's N.R., Clerk. Okay? This is about the death of his wife. And it's about his experience in dealing with the death of his wife, Joy David Ben Gresham. Lewis was a bachelor all his life until he met the woman who the book is dedicated to Joy Davidman. Okay? He meets her this is published in 1956. He meets her, she starts writing to him, I think in the late 40s. He actually meets her in the early 50s, 52, 53, something like that. Okay? And, I mean, they correspond a little bit. Lewis wrote back to everybody who wrote to him. Okay? And she finagles a way to actually meet him. They meet, and she's divorced, okay? She's atheist when she first starts writing to him, and had been a member of the Communist Party. I mean, she had all these check marks against her, so to speak, okay? So Lewis meets her and realizes one thing off the bat. She is easily his intellectual equal. Now, most people could not say that. Most people could not say they were C.S. Lewis's intellectual equal. Remember I mentioned before, Lewis was one of these people who, if you would say something just kind of off the cuff, kind of like when Bilbo says, good morning to Gandalf, and Gandalf fires off those, what do you mean, good morning? Do you mean, and Bilbo's kind of like, I mean all of those. Okay? Lewis was that Gandalf kind of person who would take apart what you say. Joy David Gresham could keep up with him in that. So they would have these arguments, etc. Okay? They get married. They initially get married. That is, when they first get married, they do it in a civil ceremony for a civil reason. She is going to be deported from England because she's not an English citizen. It's shortly after the war. Things are in a bad state. Lewis marries her. Why? She now has an anchor that ties her to England. Okay? They don't, quote unquote, do anything with the marriage. That is, it's not like they live together necessarily. Right? But she then is diagnosed with cancer, bone cancer, if I remember right. Okay? And then they have an actual religious ceremony. They have a real wedding. Okay? And Lewis, according to his letters and this, is madly, deeply, passionately in love with her. Now, he is, by the time they get married, he is like 50, I think it's 56 when they get married. He's like 58 years old. Right? She's a few years younger than he is. They get married. She has a remission. Cancer goes away. And 4 years later, boom, it comes back in force. And she dies, 1960. Lewis writes this to express his grief. And this is essentially, why God? Why did you do this to me? Now you have to understand, Lewis also in the 1940s delivered a series of radio addresses over the BBC that later he publishes, each of them individually, individual little like booklets, but then he collects them in 1946 or so under the title Mere Christianity. Becomes one of the most famous, quote, works of apologetics, defenses of Christianity of the 20th century. I mean, hugely important. He gets his face on Time magazine again because of that. He had it first in 1939 because he wrote a little book called The Screwtape Letters, which John Cleese did an audio version of, read them, and won a Grammy for. Because, John Cleese does the voice of the devils in here superbly. This is all about a senior tempter writing to a junior tempter about how to tempt his patient into hell. All right? Again, instant classic, got his face on Time magazine in 1939 because of it. He also writes, between this, okay, I mentioned Mere Christianity. He also writes a little book called The Problem of Pain. It's about 150, 200 pages, in which he's going to lay out why pain exists and lay out the kind of Christian justification for pain. It's very heady and intellectual. It has no heart to it. All right? I think this, and this all get their summation, and everything else Lewis wrote, by the way, Chronicles of Narnia and everything, they all get their summation in Till We Have Faces. It's Until We Have Faces, his last work of fiction, that kind of Lewis sums up everything he's been writing about, both in his Christian apologetic stuff and in his literary criticism. He wraps it all together into a single cohesive whole. So, you get in this, yes, a lot of myth. Why? He loved myth. Okay? You also get a lot of logic. You get a lot of Greek ideas. Why? Well, you've got a guy in here nicknamed the Fox, who is a Greek tutor. That is, he's from Greece. He's tutor to the king's daughters. He's teaching them Greek ideas. Now, the Greek ideas are not the same kinds of ideas as are prominent in the city or country, if you want, of Glom. Okay? In fact, they're almost antithetical to it. But you get a lot of ideas from mere Christianity, too. And you get ideas from Problem of Pain. But one thing Lewis does in here that he doesn't do here is he arrives at some conclusions that are a little bit different from this. Okay? One of those is reason and logic can only take you so far. That is, not everything is explainable. Not everything is understandable. There are things that must be taken on faith. Okay? We'll stop there. For Wednesday, have the first fourth of this read, or through page 76. I'm going to divide it into fourths. Hold on one second. Yeah, I'll divide it into fourths. So I have through page 76 read. Might have a quiz over that. Hopefully I won't be so scattered.